Hi everyone, Professor Mendez-Escobar here. Today I'll be talking to you about the course observations or Child Development 101. In this class, you're going to be observing 4 different children, so that means that you're going to have a total of 4 different observations. In this video, I'll talk to you about the first 3 observations because the 4th one is longer and that will be in another video. So for your first 3 observations, you're going to observe young children of these different ages. The first child, an infant, so that is from birth to about 18 months. The second observation will be of a toddler from about 19 to 35 months. And the third observation will be of a preschool age child, 3 to 5 years of age. The child for your observation. In each of your observations, you're going to be observing one child of one of the ages indicated, so one of these 3 different ages. It's important that you have no close relation to the child that you are observing. If you are a parent, it won't be your own child. If you have young siblings or cousins, it cannot be that child. If you are in the field working with young children, it would not be any of the children that are in your room. It's important that when you do your observations that you can remain objective and merely observe. Which means when you're doing your observations, kind of think about yourself like a fly on the wall. You're not going to be interacting with the young children. You're simply going to be observing. When you don't interact, it allows you to be able to see more of what the child is doing and what's happening in the environment. You also want to make sure that the child is active. So that means that they are engaged in play, interaction, they're doing something. So they would not necessarily be sitting down and watching TV or anything of the sort. Next, we'll focus on the setting. You want to make sure that when you're observing a child, they are in a naturalistic setting. So that means an everyday type of environment. And when I say every day, it may not necessarily be an environment where the child is every day, but it's an environment where we would expect the young child to be. So that can be an educational setting, such as a child care center, a preschool. It could also be a recreative setting, such as a park, a museum. You can also do your observations in the home. You want to make sure that when you go to do your observation, you want to go at the best time for that particular environment. So if you're going into the home, you want to make sure that you go when the child is not taking a nap, because then you wouldn't have an active child. Before you do your observation, there are some questions that you want to ask yourself and be able to get those answers. First, you want to know some general information about the child, such as their name and their age. You also want to know who might be there when you go and do your observation. And one key important point is that you need to go and do your observation when the child is going to have a caregiver present. Because if you recall, you are just observing, you're not interacting. So you want to make sure that there is a caregiver present when you go and do your observation. It's great that if you could do your observation in a social type of environment so that you can see some interactions, particularly if you choose to write about social emotional development. Before you go to your observation, you want to ask when is the best time to go. And I encourage you to ask any questions about anything about the child. So if there's anything in particular that you should know about the child or about the setting. During your observation, you want to go for about an hour and 15 minutes each visit. If you do all 4 visits for an hour and 15 minutes, that will give you the 5 hours that you need for this course. You want to make sure that you go no less than 1 hour. It's important that when we do observations of young children and their caregivers are going to be present, that we go for at least an hour. That's about the time that it takes for people to, including children, to kind of feel more at ease, or in the case of the children, that they kind of gave up trying to play with you because you're there to observe and that sort. So you want to make sure that you go for at least 1 hour, no less. While you are in your observation, write everything down. This is going to be so helpful when you sit down to write your paper. So while you're there, you want to write about the child's behavior. What is the child saying? To whom? Who else is present? Is there another who is the caregiver that's there? Is it a parent? Is it another relative? Is it a teacher? Who's there? Other children. You also want to write down where are you doing your observations. That's always a great place to start, just setting the stage for where you do your observation. And any other information that you think is going to be relevant for that child. Remember, when you're doing your observations, this whole entire course is about child development. So, as you could probably guess, you're going to need to connect this to developmental information. So, when I say any relevant information, it's anything else that might influence the child's development. The more you do your observations and the more you get through this course and read content, you'll know what counts as relevant information. After your observation, I highly recommend that you do this step. This is a step that not everyone might do, and when students kind of get stuck on what to write, I find that it's because they didn't do this step. So I highly recommend that you do this. Also, the act of doing this step will help you to do that final observation, which has more components to it. So you want to review your notes. Just go and look at everything you wrote. You want to do this reviewing your notes shortly after your observation. When I was out in the field working with young children and families, and I had to do case notes or what have you, I found that the best time was when it was still fresh in my mind. So review your notes shortly after your observation. You want to make sure that you begin organizing your notes. The more you do this, it'll also help you think about what to look for in future observations. So by the 5th one, you'll be really good at categorizing or organizing by physical domain, cognitive domain, and social-emotional domain. You'll know how to organize this as you read along for this course. So it's important for you to then do the next step, which is review your readings and the course content. Is there anything that you've read about and learned so far that is related to your observation? Then you're going to choose one behavior from one of the physical, cognitive, or social-emotional domains. And that's what you're going to be writing about. So these observations are not for you, the papers are not for you to write down every single thing that you saw. That's not what I am interested in. I am interested in seeing how you understand development. So you're going to choose one behavior from one domain. You want to do a different domain for each of the 3 essays. Again, this will really help you prepare for that final paper because you're going to be needing to discuss and interpret physical, cognitive, and social-emotional development. So choose a different one for each of these 3 essays. Your actual essay, you're going to be writing about one child's behavior from one of the 3 domains, as I just mentioned. You're going to interpret that behavior using a theory or milestone from the textbook. So what I would recommend that you do, identify the behavior that you're going to be talking about, explain that theory or milestone that you're going to use to interpret the behavior, and then explain how that theory or milestone specifically relates to the particular behavior that you're choosing to write about. And then you're going to compare and contrast what you read with what you observe. There are times in which, as we read developmental information, it's kind of written one way because it's generalized, and oftentimes developmental theory really focuses more on the experiences and the development of white middle class children and families. So you may do your observation across a diverse, rich, culturally rich city of Chicago, and the child that you observe might not necessarily be a white middle-class child. So are there any differences in between what you read and what you saw? I'm just giving you a racial and ethnic example, but there could be differences across social-emotional, socioeconomic status, or any other thing. So you want to see, this is what I read about in the book. It's this particular behavior that they're trying to explain, but there might be a difference between what you read and what you observed. So you want to speak to that as well, or write about that as well. Okay. To submit your essay, you're going to be submitting it online on Brightspace. So you want to check your course outline to see when is that paper due, and then you click on that particular week and you'll find the submission link for each of the different observations. They're all due at different weeks, so you want to make sure that you know when they are due, because that's going to really determine when you go and you do your observations. I recommend that you leave yourself about 2 weeks between after you do your observation to help you write and know what to write about. I understand that depending on the semester, the fall and the spring semester, those are longer. The summer semester is shorter, so you have to do things faster. So depending on which semester you're taking this course, then you might have a different amount of time, but I do recommend that you leave yourself enough time after your observation to particularly review your notes and organize them, and then help you spend time writing about it. Okay, so that's it. Those are your first 3 observations. Look out for the next video in which I will review that final observation paper.